Talk boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. We now know that Marlen Esparza is going to be squaring off against Gabriela Alaniz for a second time. This is as a result of a mandate from the WBO that if Marlen wants to keep the WBO title, she has to give Gabriela another crack at the apple. Gabriela Alaniz, the former WBO champion whose promoter petitioned a complaint to the WBO that the scoring in the match was far too lopsided, that the house fighter got far too much consideration and the scorecards were not an adequate reflection of the match. As a result of that, the WBO, they reviewed the fight and they agreed. And we've been all through that. Now as it pertains to this past weekend's fight, Gabriela Fundora, the only other champion at this weight, she was able to hold up her end of the bargain. She was able to stay champion. Now, she is in the queue, set to challenge the winner of this fight, whoever it is. And I expect that it will be Marlen Esparza, that rematches are often won by the fighter who can change, the fighter who can make the most adjustments. And I think that's Marlen more than Gabriela. I don't want to get too into it because this discussion is centered around the possibility that Marlen stays champion and Marlen moves on to fight Gabriela. If she does, what happens? Well, when it comes to Marlen Esparza, Marlen is a finesse fighting kind of fighter that's really not big on power. If that sounds familiar, it's because it is. The same could be said about the woman that Gabriela Fundora just fought, Christina Cruz. Christina, like Marlen, comes from a very good amateur background. She's got great movement, good shot selection, but she's not big on power, and neither is Marlen. So I see a situation where Gabriela could potentially do to Marlen what she just did to Christina. That could happen. But even if Marlen Esparza can hold up her end of the bargain, take care of business against Alaniz in a rematch, she's going to have a tough test in front of her in Gabriela Fundora. How does it break down? Well, this is going to sound familiar. Gabriela's a lot taller than Marlen Esparza, a lot longer and a lot stronger than Marlen Esparza.
She is.
So for Marlen, trying to fight Gabriela Fundora from the outside, that's no good. That won't do. You'll be a sitting duck out there because she's tall enough and long enough that she doesn't have to be close to you to touch you with straight punches. Thus, your best bet to put a dent in it is to get mid-range to inside. But therein lies a dilemma as well. Marlen's not a big puncher. Because she's the shorter, stumpier fighter, her best bet is to stay close to Gabriela Fundora. Stay with her and stay on top of her in the pocket. But she's not a big puncher. In a very general sense, Marlen Esparza is not a knockout merchant. She's really not a brawler either. She can work mid-range to inside, she can work, but she's not a brawler and she's not a mauler.
Nope.
Though because she can't hope to win this fight fighting from the outside, she just doesn't have the length to do it, moving around and setting up counters, trying to set traps. She'll get picked off long range. If she tries to fight from the outside, she doesn't have a choice but to fight on the inside. But that's a tough ask too. That's a tough ask when you think about it, because that would then mean that Marlen would be relying on getting into exchanges, forcing Gabriela to trade to get her own punches off. And if you force Gabriela to trade, whatever does get in, whatever she does hit you with, there's going to be a lot more on her punches than there are on Marlen's. Marlen is not a knockout merchant. Gabriela Fundora is. So you go poking the bear looking for a war, you're going to find one. To beat Gabriela Fundora, well, that's a tall order, pun intended. Just a few things to think about on the heels of this past weekend's fight and the upcoming fight at that same weight, the upcoming rematch between Marlen and Gabriela Alaniz. I do think that Marlen can win the rematch. She can adjust to win a more convincing decision. But ahead of that, she's going to have Gabriela Fundora waiting for her. I don't know about that fight. I don't know what the strategy is going to be. You can try to make yourself a small target. Barrel forward past Gabriela's straight punches. Crowd the pocket and stay with her. Stay close to her. But even if you get your punches off, Marlen's not a big puncher. That's if you can get inside on Gabriela Fundora, as you're going to come under heavy fire trying to. Gabriela Fundora, she manages the distance quite well, shows a good jab from out of the southpaw stance. She's improving. She's maturating as a fighter. The assignment might be getting close to and getting inside on Gabriela Fundora, but that doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. She can move too, and she doesn't have to move as much as you do. It's just something to think about. Let's not go putting the cart before the horse because Marlen has to deal with Gabriela Alaniz for the second time. First, let's see what happens with that. And super middleweight news as it pertains to this past weekend's action, Jaime reiterated his desire to fight Canelo Alvarez after stopping John Ryder. It will be a great fight among Mexicans. If Canelo gives us a chance, it would be an honor to be in the same ring as him. I feel there's a much more respectful tone as it pertains to a Canelo Alvarez fight when it comes to Team Munguia as opposed to Team Benavidez. David Benavidez and David Benavidez's father, Jose, who have taken to accusing Canelo of ducking them and...
Jose talks a lot of shit. He talks too much. That's the thing about these boxing dads. They talk too fucking much. Whether you're talking about Jose Benavidez or Angel Garcia, Bill Haney too.
Boxing dads aside, you just notice a more respectful tone when it comes to a Canelo fight from Team Munguia as opposed to Team Benavidez.
Yeah.
There have been rumors and rumblings that Canelo Alvarez may end up facing the other Charlo brother in his next fight, Jermall Charlo. We saw him in the ring with Jermell the last time we saw him, and the next time we may see him in the ring with Jermall. I would much rather a Jaime Munguia fight in May than a fight with Jermall. I don't need to see either of the Charlo brothers in the ring with Canelo because it's clear to me now that the both of them, all they're going to do is show up for a check. That's the kind of quote-unquote fighters they are.
For all the hullabaloo we've heard about them fighting Canelo Alvarez for years now, I mean, it's literally been years of people blowing smoke up everybody's ass about how Canelo's so scared of them, he's avoiding them. The only one who was scared was Jermell. Jermell was scared to engage. He fought to survive. His brother Jermall, he would do the exact same thing.
I don't want to see Canelo versus Charlo in May. For that, I'd rather see Canelo versus Munguia. The problem is, according to Fight Hub's Marcos Villegas, Munguia was asked if he's ready to fight Canelo. He said he is, but there's still a lot of work to do. That he's not looking for the fight immediately, he wants to rest.
What are the obstacles?
Because there are always obstacles. One among them is that they're on different sides of the street. They fight on different platforms, they're with different outfits. Canelo's got a multi-fight deal with the PBC. He already had his first fight of what is supposed to be a 3-fight deal. His next fight will be his second fight of that 3-fight deal. But essentially, at least for now, he's with the PBC, whereas Jaime, he's co-promoted. Co-promoted by both Golden Boy Promotions and Zenfer Promotions, a Mexican-based outfit south of the border. Would they jointly decide to send Jaime over to the PBC, who's just inked a deal with Amazon? Would they send Jaime over there for a Canelo fight? Or is it going to turn into a sides of the street kind of situation?
We can't bank on that fight being the next fight after what Jaime said. He says he's ready for Canelo and he wants to fight him, but it doesn't have to be immediate, and he wants to rest. That there's more work to do.
So here's what I think.
What?
Irrespective of whether or not he actually fights Canelo in Canelo's very next fight, this past weekend's fight was a good advertisement for him. Stopping John Ryder the way that he did and entertaining approximately 10,000 fans that showed up just to see this thing. Just to watch him fight John Ryder, who was coming off a lopsided beating, a one-sided loss to Canelo Alvarez last year. He was able to bring 10,000 people into that place just to see him fight John.
It was a good advertisement for Jaime. In a very general sense, it was a good advertisement.
But as a result of Jaime performing the way that he did against John, a common opponent between him and Canelo, there is now an expressed desire, enthusiasm, at least in some quarters, to see him fight Canelo, and that has given rise to some criticisms.
The bull birds are on the perch.
In my weekend recap video, I had one guy leave me a goddamn essay about how Jaime's overrated. He's overrated.
What do you mean overrated? Who's overrating him? Did you see him on somebody's pound-for-pound list or something? Because he's not on mine.
It's just another example of how some people in boxing throw around words they don't know how to use just because they hear other people use them. If you're saying that Jaime's overrated, who's overrating him?
As well as telling me that the Jaime Munguia versus Canelo Alvarez fight is in no way, shape, or form on the same scale as the Benavidez fight.
And how the fuck would you know? I'm seeing a lot of David Benavidez supporters in their tits. Guys telling me that Jaime don't deserve the fight as much as David, but Who said that he did?
I didn't. All I said was Jaime made a splash this weekend, and now, as a result of how he performed, people won't mind seeing him against Canelo. That's all I said. Dazaev never came into it.
A lot of Benavidez fans telling me that David Benavidez would decapitate him, that he would stop him, that he would do this and he would do that, and he'd knock him out like he knocked out Caleb Plant, right?
Right.
Or were you still buzzing from him knocking out the 36-year-old Demetrius Andrade that had no signature victories across 3 weight classes, none at 154, none at 160, and none at 168? Is that what you're up in arms about?
Jaime has firepower. That's established. He established that this weekend. He's not a light punching 36-year-old like Demetrius Andrade.
That aside, you've got a lot of Benavidez fans who are in their tits because now people are expressing an interest in seeing Jaime in the ring with Canelo. And I said it in my previous video, that's not an either-or situation as far as I'm concerned. Canelo can fight Jaime, and then he can fight David. Or he can fight David and fight Jaime down the line.
It's a similar assignment for Canelo anyway.
Similar situation with both. In Jaime Munguia, like with David Benavidez, Canelo would be facing a taller, longer fighter than himself, pressure fighters, volume punches that like to be mid-range to inside, getting off their combinations. It's a very similar assignment. Stylistically, it's basically the same fight. Boxer-puncher versus pressure fighter.
Canelo is the boxer-puncher, the counter-puncher, and those two, they're the pressure guys.
Yeah, Jaime's limited. No one said that he isn't, but so is David Benavidez.
Well, he couldn't stop Caleb Plant.
David Benavidez, you got a guy around 6'2", 6'3", likely rehydrates to at or around 200 pounds the night of a fight. And this massive super middleweight, he can't break a clinch. He can't create some space to get some punches off on what is a so obviously exhausted fighter.
Caleb was exhausted, but David couldn't knock him out. He couldn't so much as knock him down.
Yeah, Jaime Munguia is limited. I've said that a million times.
I have.
But so is David. The difference between us is you're putting David on a pedestal, like he's so much better.
That's what you're doing.
Whereas I'm not doing that with Jaime. I'm not putting him on a pedestal by saying that he's improved from when last we saw him. That's not putting him on a pedestal. He showed improvement. He handled himself well, and that's all it is. I do think it's impressive that he was able to get over 10,000 people in there in David Benavidez's home state just to see him fight John Ryder.
No pay-per-view necessary. Not that David's pay-per-view sold all that much, either of them.
That many people showed up to see Jaime fight John after John is coming off a loss in David's home state? Yeah, I think that's impressive. That's a good sign. Men's heavyweight news. Frank Warren chimed in on the upcoming Joshua versus Ngannou fight, saying it's interesting to see what Ngannou learned from the Fury fight. Tyson Fury, who is a very different fighter than Anthony Joshua, described as being very skillful by Dewey Cooper, who trains Francis Ngannou, though not as big a threat as Anthony Joshua. His words.
Not only has Team Ngannou identified Anthony Joshua as a threat, they identified him as a bigger threat than Tyson Fury.
For AJ going into the fight, at least he's seen him, Ngannou, now in a boxing ring, how he performs in a boxing ring against probably the best heavyweight in the world against Tyson Fury. Frank Warren told seconds out, so he knows what to expect. What will be interesting to see is what Ngannou has learned from his first fight he has had as a heavyweight. Obviously, anyone now fighting him will be looking to see what are the chinks in his armor, what they can exploit, and so forth. Can he get better? It's going to be very, very interesting, and what tactics AJ uses in the fight. He's a big puncher himself. Is he just going to try and take him out? I don't know.
I think he'll grind him down first. Break him down with the jab, often described as the most important punch in boxing. A good jab will stop a lot of things from happening.
Stop a lot of things from happening before they start. Frank Warren continued, Ngannou has shown that if he catches you, he can hurt you. He's done that as a UFC fighter, a tremendous puncher. You don't want to be fighting him on the inside because that's his game. That's what they do. You're not going to fiddle with him on the inside. That's the way they fight. You also see that he's a big puncher. If he catches AJ, I think he can knock him out. But then I think he can knock out nearly any heavyweight. If he catches them, he's that type of fighter. He's a big puncher, and he showed that he can box a bit. He looked to have been working off the counter in the Tyson Fury fight, waiting for Tyson Fury to commit to a shot, then catching him.
That's how he caught him.
And while it shouldn't have happened, it did. Tyson Fury tried for the right and committed to it and got caught with Ngannou's left, his counter left. And if you know the guy's trying to counter you, trying to set you up. One way you can stop that from happening is using the jab.
Staying on your toes, maintaining distance, and using the jab.
The way that Anthony Joshua did in the Andy Ruiz rematch. Now, granted that Francis Ngannou is a more physically imposing fighter than Andy Ruiz. He takes up a lot more space. He's a bigger guy than Andy Ruiz, but Andy's got a lot more experience in a boxing ring than Francis Ngannou. And in the Andy Ruiz rematch, we saw that Anthony Joshua can stick to a game plan, stay on his toes, and box behind the jab for 36 minutes. If he did that with Andy, I think he can do that just fine with Francis and break him down with the jab.
You don't get right hand happy. You bust him up. Bust him up with the jab. Break him down first before you go committing to your punches.
Remember that the bar has been set exceptionally low by Tyson Fury, who was supposed to be a better fighter than Anthony Joshua. And if Tyson Fury can get away with not knocking this guy out, then so can AJ. There's no rush and no obligation to have to stop him, even though I think that Anthony can and Anthony will. But there's no rush to do it. He has to exhibit the same poise that he showed in the Otto Wallin fight, breaking his man down round after round by boxing smart.
And I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to win. I think he might knock out Francis in what is intended to be a segue for Anthony to challenge the winner of Fury versus Usyk. Really, Fury, because if Usyk wins, I don't think we're getting a third fight.
Not another AJ versus Usyk fight, a trilogy, but if Fury wins, we might get that. Tyson Fury was asked about boxing Anthony Joshua very recently in a sit-down interview with Alexander Usyk, and Fury was dismissive. Fury said in so many words, why should he box Anthony Joshua after this if Usyk already beat him?
What?
Which doesn't make sense because you boxed Derek Chisora for a third time, and you had already beat him. So what's the problem with you fighting Anthony? The ball's in your court. The Saudis want to do it.
Eddie Hearn is receptive. Anthony is receptive. The fans are going to want to see it.
British boxing fans are not hung up on perfection and perfectly unblemished records. Underneath it all, they still want to see Anthony Joshua settle it with Tyson Fury, especially if Fury beats Usyk. But even if he doesn't, they're still going to want to see it.
Just like they still wanted to see Khan versus Brook for all those years.
They're still going to want to see Joshua versus Fury, win or lose, next month. The easiest way to describe it is that the ball is in Fury's court to do that fight. But if he doesn't, you can't blame AJ anymore.
What has been subject to some debate for some years now. Who wants the fight and who doesn't?
We'll get that answer shortly.